What are you gonna do today, Napoleon?
Whatever I feel like I want to do. Gosh!
People go to the movies for emotion, for an experience, and for a story. Rarely do we see films that lack all three of those traits and succeed to a level that it gets a cult following. I mean, that's ridiculous. Well, Napoleon Dynamite did just that, and to a pretty hilarious extent. The people that love this movie love it for its humor, its simplicity, and its characters. Seems simple enough, makes you think, well, I can make a movie like that in no time. But the thing about Napoleon Dynamite is that it's much more than that. What if I told you that Napoleon Dynamite is a symbol for honesty? Napoleon's lines are hilarious to us, but why? They're short, simple, and they don't really have a punchline to them. I guess it may be because they're unexpected and out of nowhere, but are they really? You see, I might sound like an asshole here, but Napoleon's lines are usually just things in our head that we're too afraid to say. I mean, it doesn't take much digging to pull out some obvious lines.
I see you're drinking 1%. Is that because you think you're fat? Tina, you fat lard, come get some dinner! Are you gonna eat your tots?
The list goes on.
No.
These are things that we can't ever picture ourselves saying out loud, but they are in some shape or form in our head in these scenarios. It's like these characters want us to say these things. The build-up before the line is pushing these lines to the forefront of our head and giving us a sense of questioning on whether or not we should say it, only to be followed shortly after by Napoleon Dynamite saying just what we were thinking in an incredibly blunt tone.
Because you're not. You could be drinking whole if you wanted to.
Napoleon acts as our honest thoughts. He's a walking brain that spills out whatever comes to mind on the daily.
You got like 3 feet of air that time.
This explains why basically everyone in his life is mad at Napoleon pretty much all the time. This is the film's way of saying how people hate honesty. People avoid honesty to death because it's mostly associated with negativity. People like Uncle Rico, Kip, and Summer are perfect examples. They all dislike Napoleon's presence because they get brought down from their ego, Kip being a prime example. When Kip starts hanging around Napoleon less, with Napoleon being out and about for that part of the movie, Kip gains a bit of confidence and ego,
Napoleon, don't be jealous that I've been chatting online with babes all day.
resulting in him getting with LaFonda. With all that being said, there's also a lot to say about Napoleon's tight and odd friendship with Pedro and Deb. They are the other forms of honesty in his life. Similar to Napoleon, Pedro does a lot of what's just on his mind. When Pedro gets hot, he cuts off all of his hair, a fantasy some of us might dream of when we're profusely sweating, but never something we'd ever go forward with. Now with Deb, she isn't exactly honest, rather she's the opposite. She is friends with Napoleon because she needs honesty in her life, something that the other characters in the story don't realize. She spends her afternoon wheeling around keychains and bracelets, trying to make people look prettier, knowing well that it won't do the results that she says they will. Napoleon brings into her life a sense of honesty that she cherishes and accepts.
Already made like affinity of those at scout camp.
When drawing to the conclusion that Napoleon is the human version of honesty, I came to realize that writers Jared Hess and Jerusha Hess knew a good amount of what they were doing, which prompted me to wonder if there was a real concise story here. Here's what I got. Jared Hess has only done a few other films besides this, one of which being Nacho Libre. Nacho Libre is also incredibly odd and uncomfortable, but feels very different from Napoleon Dynamite. One similarity I drew between the two films was eggs. Yes, eggs. Halfway through Nacho Libre, Nacho drinks the yolk from an eagle's egg in an attempt to become more powerful as a wrestler. In Napoleon Dynamite, there's also a scene where Napoleon drinks a yolk from an egg. I know this is a stretch, but how often do you see a director put 2 egg drinking scenes in his movies back to back? Based on what I got from Nacho Libre, I assume that Hess makes eggs out to be symbols for power and ego. When Nacho drinks from the egg, while he might not necessarily gain anything, he sure as hell gets a lot cockier and feels almost like a god. Now, does this translate over to Napoleon? Well, I look closer and it does. Following this scene, Napoleon gets a call from Trisha, telling him that she will definitely be going to the dance with him. The old Napoleon would have easily addressed something about the fact that she's calling him, but instead he just goes along with it. We also see Napoleon gain a sense of confidence when he's in the lowrider and when he's talking to her dad. The scenes themselves are still funny and odd, so we naturally don't notice a difference as an audience. But in reality, this isn't the same Napoleon from before. It takes a real, straightforward lie that affects Napoleon directly for him to understand and remember how dishonesty ruins the world. When Rico lies to Deb and says Napoleon thinks she should get bigger breasts, suddenly we not only have an angry Deb, but we also have an angry Napoleon. Napoleon says to Rico that he's ruining everybody's lives, and while it does sound sort of like a joke, he's right. When Napoleon is not the center of the world like he is when he's honest, the other people in his life take over, and that's when things become a mess. It takes Napoleon dancing, something he does alone in front of the entire school, to show Deb and Pedro that he's still honest, because if we're being real, the guy walking down the road in that slick tux would have never danced like this. The film, while being goofy, has an angered tone beneath it. The film is a story of how society, specifically middle-class teenagers, are incapable of handling and accepting the truth. The film isn't a cry for help for the real Napoleon Dynamite, because it's hard to believe somebody like that actually exists. The film is instead a statement on how we all, to a certain extent, exclude, dislike, or secretly need honesty in our lives. An important aspect of every great film is seeing how our protagonist changes from beginning to end. Napoleon Dynamite is a great movie, at least to me, but Napoleon doesn't change from the beginning to the end, really. The change is instead happening to the people around him. If I were to describe the film's real plot in one sentence, I would say it's about a group of different people of all races, genders, and backgrounds who are all directly affected when honesty is brought into their lives. I know that at this point I might sound like I'm sucking the fun out of a dumb comedy, but this has never felt like any other comedy to me. There really is something to say about the film's narrative, and this is my honest interpretation. The film has unintentionally taught me, and probably everybody else, that the truth isn't something to hide from. Rather, it's something we should all take into consideration because, at the end of the day, it's important to know how to laugh at ourselves. As always, thanks for watching, and subscribe to my channel, and all your wildest dreams will come true.